November the 8th, 1972. No, that's okay. Jim, I'm going to ask you once more there. We're having a little trouble with the tape. When were you born?
March the 30th, 1904.
And your father's name?
John W.
Mother's maiden name?
Elizabeth Wells.
And where were you born? What part of town?
Where the country club is now.
And you went to school where?
Well, I started out in Oklahoma in 1900 and, let's see, that would have been 2, 3, that'd be 1906. And I came back here and went to school out northeast of Urbana, Mount Zion, to the 4th grade. I put in a couple years out at Linlawn, the old Linlawn High School. Then I moved down to LaGrow, and I graduated from LaGrow, and I don't even remember the year, out of grade school.
Yeah, and how did you happen to go to Wabash High School then?
Well, at that time, I couldn't get, they didn't have the studies I wanted at LaGrow, and I wanted to be transferred to Wabash. They wouldn't transfer me, so my father paid the difference, and I walked from out here east on 24 into Wabash my freshman year.
Then your family moved into town?
Family moved out here south of town, and I finished out and graduated from Wabash High School in 1923, I believe.
Yeah. What did you do when you graduated from high school then, Jim?
I worked at the Ford meter box for about 4 or 6 months. I had an opportunity to go to a trade school at Bryan, Ohio. I spent 2 years there. I learned the pattern maker's trade and had a union journeyman's card. I came back to Wabash. Was unemployed for about 6 months, and I went to work at the Marion Iron Foundry, Marion Machine and Iron Foundry, I think it was at that time. And after a short hitch over there, I left. Was unemployed for about 6 months. I was called because of scientific electrical, especially experience I had had in school. I went to work at the old Wabash Water and Light plant, assistant engineer under Sherm Goodlander. 1 year down there, a little over, and they joined the Northern Indiana Public Service Commission and phased this one out. And from some previous experience I'd had from Mark Honeywell personally while I was in high school, they called me, and I went down there and went to work. And that was about 23, 43, that must have been about 1926 or 7, along in there someplace.
Yeah. How did you meet Mr. Honeywell the first time? You said you had a previous experience.
Well, they called me to come down and talk to Mr. Honeywell while I was in high school, a junior in high school. And previous experience in a little organization I had of George Reddick, Jim Hummer, I can't even remember all of them. Myself, we were interested in model airplanes and flying, and I'd made a bunch of little air propellers and so forth, and Mark Honeywell was getting into the air circulation, hot air heating systems, and he called me to come down and talk to him about making some propellers or fan blades to circulate air through systems. And I did some work for him, and that's how I got connected with Mark Honeywell.
Yeah. Did Mark pay you for this work when you were in high school? Is that Jim?
I don't remember. I'll be honest about it. I don't remember whether they gave me something or I just did it because I was interested. Yeah. I can't tell you.
What was Mr. Honeywell like back in those days?
Well, he was a hard-working fellow, very common. Anybody could deal with him. You didn't feel out of self-conscious or out of order when you talked to him, and I think the friendship started then.
Yeah. Well, then you later went to work for him. How did you happen to get into this particular occupation?
Well, they needed someone in the model shop. That's the experimental department where all these ideas that Mr. Honeywell would think of, he would have somebody that was skilled in that particular line, a workman, make his models for him. So I went to work in the experimental and model department down where the data view is now in the basement.
Mm-hmm. What did you do?
Well, I did experimental work and model work for him for about a year, and then they started up a new department, the master staff they called it, and Ray Launder had done the groundwork on that, and I don't know why I was chosen, but they asked me to be transferred up there and take over that department of about 6 people, and so I started in the production end of it then.
Yeah. Was Phil Magner active at this time?
No, that's Phil Magner was still out at the school. Phil Magner is the one that gave me my start in the scientific field. I wasn't a very good student, but I was interested in electricity and science and radio and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Did Mr. Honeywell take an active interest in the development and the research that was being done at that time?
Oh, yes, he was right in on everything. He'd come up with a rough pencil sketch of an idea he had, and then you had to make a model, and he'd look at it from a layman's standpoint, the appearance and so forth, and make alterations till it suited him, and then we went ahead and developed the engineering end of it, put it on the market.
Did you ever see him get mad?
No, the only time I think that Mark Honeywell ever got mad at me was shortly after I was in charge of a department of about 20 people, and one slightly handicapped mentally person worked for me, and I was having trouble finding something for him to do, and one day he irritated me, and I sent him up to the other plant to get a stovepipe wrench and some striped ink. And I was called on the carpet in Mr. Honeywell's office in about an hour, and Mark was very strict looking when I walked in, and he looked at me a minute and started laughing. He appreciated the joke, but he felt that we ought to keep it out of the shop.
Yeah. Well, then, what turn did your career take as regards to Honeywell's after you?
Well, after the master stat department, I trained the person to take over that, and then they asked me to take charge of an assembly department down on South Carroll Street. We had about 50 in there at the time. We made humidistats, oil valves, I don't know, 4 or 5 other items. And I got that organized, and then out of a clear sky, they asked me to go back into engineering. At that time, the main plant was where the plane dealer and the 1 hour cleaner is.
On West Canal Street?
On West Canal Street. So I went back to that department, and I worked in engineering in the model shop for probably a year, and then they decided to start a foundry and do their own foundry work and pattern work. They got my brother to come in and run the pattern shop. Shortly after that, they transferred me into that department, and I worked there in the pattern shop for about 2 years, I think. And then they got into war work, and they had to have that area for bomb sites or something. It was very technical, and they had to have it air conditioned and so forth, and they decided to phase out the foundry, that particular operation. They approached I and my brothers, both of them worked there at the time, to take over that operation and do their foundry work for them, and we were very reluctant. We had no business experience. But after some persuasion and thought, we did. So in well, you'll have to count this back. I'm not good at figures. That'd be 32 years ago.
That'd be 1940.
All right, 1940 of October. We started up with the equipment that we bought off the Honeywell plant, our own business.
Yeah.
Vice Brothers Foundry and Pattern Shop.
Who were you dealing with when you were making these negotiations for?
Mark Honeywell personally.
Was he an extremely fair individual?
Well, he was, but he tried to take the advice of his key people down there on the value of the equipment that they wanted us to take over, and a lot of it wasn't practical from our standpoint. We didn't have that kind of money, and we offered about half of what the price was, with the understanding we only had to take the things that we could use. Anything we didn't think we wanted, we didn't take.
Right.
And it was a little ridiculous, but Honeywell thought it over a while, and he wanted to get that out, and I think he wanted to do something for local people, so he took us up on it, and we found that we were in the same position I'm in as mayor today. We stuck our neck out and got caught in our own trap. We got it.
Did he have any suggestion as to financing through the First National? Or?
No, the financing was done by the company. It was set up on a monthly basis. We had to pay so much, and if we defaulted, we lost what we had in it, and they could come back and take the whole thing. And for the first year, we had to, it was a captive place, we had to do strictly their work. And I and my brothers built our own building and did the most of the work ourselves. We did turn out Honeywell's work. We limited ourselves to $25 a week drawing account for our families. And all over that went back in the business. We made our payments regular for a period of about 9 months. We saved enough money to go in and pay the whole thing off. And then we started branching out and taking on other customers.
Did you continue to do Honeywell's work then after that?
We continued to do Honeywell's work. They were our pride and joy because I spent 16 years with Honeywell's, and my brothers had both spent approximately that time. They were our first concern, but it was seasonal. And we had enough backlog of other customers. We never solicited business. We had people come to us. In 1944, someone had heard of us and came in from Fort Wayne, Stratifor Products. And we started doing work for them. We've had that account ever since. That, up until the last 5 years, has been our main customer. And then as Honeywell's phased out in that particular line of work, we still send different items to Minneapolis. We still send some items to their branch plants in Mobile, Alabama, and some to Chicago plant. But we've tried to discourage it because of transportation charges. And that's about it.
Who were you dealing with primarily when we got into these financial negotiations with Honeywell on the payment of the plant and so forth?
Nobody but Mark Honeywell.
But who was advising him as to the relative cost of the foundry equipment and that? Howard Roby
Paul Shivers, the chief engineer.
Yeah, and he thought the material was worth more than what it was.
Well, certainly.
Yeah. Was that a happy arrangement you and your brothers made then when...
Well, we fought before we got in business, and we didn't, everybody predicted we wouldn't last 6 months, and we'd be back to work at Honeywell's. But we had differences, but nothing serious. We went on in business till my older brother's health got bad. That was back about 8 or 9 years ago. And we had him retire, and my other younger brother and I took it over, bought him out. And a little over a year ago, my younger brother's health went bad, so he had to get out of the business. Then I got involved in politics a year ago, and I got stuck with the mayor's job, and I can't devote the time to the business, and I won't have a conflict of interest, so we incorporated, and I've turned the business over to my key employees, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But for the next 3 years, this year and the next 3 years, the profits they make will be theirs. I get $30 a week retainer as being consultant engineer and secretary and treasurer, and I get in a couple times a week.
Yeah. Do you remember anything humorous that happened with Mr. Honeywell?
Yes. While I was a department head, foreman with about 30 people in this is not very polite, but I'll tell you.
Go ahead. It's just going on tape for history.
At that time, I chewed tobacco. And I had a big chew of tobacco in my mouth, and Mark Honeywell came along, and he always stopped and visited with the people that were working for him. he started a long conversation, and I couldn't very well get any place to spit, so I just held on to it. And Mark realized what was happening, so he continued the conversation on the plane that I had to give answers. And I nodded my head as much as I could, and I finally got to the point I had to make a direct answer, so I wound up with swallowing it. And when I got through, Mark started laughing and walked away and left me. And I've never had to chew tobacco since.
Yeah. Was Mark characteristics would you say of Mr. Honeywell?
Well, he was a perfectionist. He was an eccentric in a lot of ways, but everything had to be right. I enjoyed working with him because even after we had branched out and got clear away from there, Mark would come out and have some little idea that he respected my brother and myself and our knowledge in being workmen to do it for him, and even the balls out there on the gates that went into the gardens. Mm-hmm. He came out and had me do that on the side. Well, in a way, I didn't like to work too much with him because some little line that you couldn't imagine or visualize, Mark Honeywell could see it just at a glance, and he'd have you go back and change it. Well, you'd change it, and he'd come back in a day or two later and look at it, and he'd have another little change. But it's like he said, he was paying for it. And at one time, I remember one humorous thing that happened. One of the supervisors down there, I won't even mention the man's name, but they were told to do something, and he said, I won't spend Mark Honeywell's money that way. It was wrong. He didn't approve of it. He wouldn't spend Mark's money that way. And Mark called him in on the carpet and chewed him out a little, and he said, it's my money. I'm spending it. You do what I say. Now, what do you think? And I think that was very characteristic of it. At one time, he pulled me off the engineering and model department against the chief engineer's wishes. At that time, he had a hobby of the motion pictures. He had a fellow by the name of Larson, photographer and technician on motion pictures. They hired him from Chicago on a salary. Mark would think up some new idea instead of buying it on the market. Well, he had to design it and make it. Well, he'd come up with a rough sketch, so he pulled me off of the engineering and had me do this work for him personally. And at that time, Mark was spending a good deal of his time at Miami. He would call in and send letters and so forth, instructions, and every time we did anything, well, we had to be in touch with him. And he was building a studio out there at the time where the country club is now, their main building. And he had a couple expert stonemasons working out there. And every week they had to Marvel Woolrod with his personal secretary, and she had to send pictures of the progress that was going on. And they were building a stone wall, and they had it completed, and Marvel sent the pictures down, and they came back in a day or two, and he had marks on them, different stones that stood out in there, and he wanted them taken out. He wanted them changed. Well, the stonemason got mad, and he said he'd been a stonemason all of his life, and he wasn't going to have anybody telling him how to do the work, so he quit. Well, they had to replace him, and the wall had to be torn down, and the stone came out. Mm-hmm. And Floyd Webb did the same thing when Phil Magner was the supervisor of the Honeywell Foundation. And Floyd Webb had a retainer fee to work for Mark Honeywell personally. And Floyd Webb did all that work. And very often Floyd would get irritated because from his contract work that he'd been doing for years, he didn't think it was practical. But he took the attitude that if Mark Honeywell wants it that way, that's the way it'll be built. Mm-hmm. They made a number of changes down there in the Honeywell Foundation, which Phil Magner can bring you up to date on that, because he was right on it.
He has. How about the motion picture business? You referred to that just a second ago. How much did you get into that end of Mr. Honeywell's activities?
Well, I made just about anything that Mark Honeywell thought of. Editing machines that you could buy, but he had a different idea, so we'd spend thousands of dollars building one the way he wanted. Film drying racks, developing tanks out there at the lodge, which was the motion picture studio originally. I spent months making cart that you could tow a cameraman and a camera around on. I made extension telescoping booms to reach out here and carry a microphone. No, I spent over a year and a half, and I turned in my own time, worked at my own hours. Seth Larson, his photographer, he'd get the call late at night to come down to Florida that he wanted some pictures taken down there, and Seth would jump on a plane and fly down and spend a week and take pictures, which Mark showed privately. I don't know whatever happened to his pictures, but it was a hobby, and he got a big enjoyment out of it, and I think that everybody that worked with him on the thing enjoyed it.
These were talkies?
Yes, we did have a lot of silent pictures. We got sound. It was just about the time sound came out here along the soundtrack, the edge of the film, and that created a lot of problems because I knew very little about it. And Mark's standby answer was said, if you don't know, find out, regardless of what it costs. So I did get technical books and one thing and another, and they made a motion picture of some of the local talent here at one time when they had this old dam for the mill out here in Union Mills. They had a dam up there on Treaty Creek, right there where the curve is now in the road. And they had a couple of local kids go out there and practice carrying the heroine across the dam there when the water was running over. I think young, can't even think of his name now, Nixon, that's the editor of the Plain Dealer down at or the paper down at Peru. John, I think John Nixon and my daughter, a bunch of them were involved in that. High school students that he used for props. They got quite a bang out of it. I don't know whatever happened to that picture.
Did you ever, were you ever there when he actually did the filming?
Oh, yes. A number of times.
And did he...
There was all kinds of pictures taken of different activities, both in Miami and out here, and we had quite a setup for a Venetian party that he was going to give down at his home out on the island. And I and about 4 others, George Keller and Hummer, my brother, myself, made all kinds of ornamental things to be put up out there in the harbor on posts to create a Venetian scene. And we were making them here like mad, and he'd give us sketches, and we'd make great big models and send down. Keller would crate them and ship them down there. And we were almost completed with it, and they were almost ready for the party when Mrs. Honeywell fell out of a window down there and hurt herself. In fact, that was the cause of her death. So where that stuff ever happened, I don't know, but we were all set up to make motion pictures on it, and it was quite a gala event. But
did they ever call you to Florida?
Twice, and I didn't go.
Didn't go either time?
No.
Yeah. Did you see Mr. Honeywell after you left the plant in his later years?
Yes. He came out to our place many times after that and would stop to see how we're getting along and visit, just like, well, you wouldn't have thought we were the workmen and he was a millionaire, but that was the attitude and the feeling we had. Yes, he was very friendly any time we run into him.
Did you meet first Mrs. Honeywell? Have you met her?
No, not officially, no. I knew her, but I never met her.
Yeah. What would you say the relationship of the Honeywell Corporation to the community has been, Jim, all these years that you've been?
Well, Wabash wouldn't be where it is today if it hadn't been for that. There's no question about that. Mr. Honeywell was very civic-minded, and he had the money to spend on it. My only comment over the years would be that when he put up the Honeywell Foundation with the stipulations and the thought he had in mind of it being a community thing, I believe that he'd be very disturbed, and this is a controversial statement for me to make, I say what I think. I feel that he'd be very disturbed about the situation of community service, Girl and Boy Scouts today in relation to that setup.
You mean not being in the building anymore?
Not being in there, because that was his whole purpose and thought. Community service, he and Cecil Mills, and his thoughts on the youth of the community, And over the period of years, we've drifted into a more commercial thing down there, and we've kind of weeded out in a way, now this is not 100%, it's not being derogatory in any matter, but I think Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, community service has more or less been kind of pushed in the background. I think other activities entered into it that Mr. Honeywell today would not approve of. For instance, the Girl Scout cabin out here that he set up on that estate. That's been thumped around, but really today it's just too bad that the Girl Scouts don't have the facility that Mr. Honeywell had envisioned. And I think community services got shuffled around in the background. There are 2 or 3 things happened there. Today it's good, it's wonderful, it's a good program. But we don't have the Honeywell influence and the Cecil Mills influence that we had in those days. Community service was a wonderful thing then. It is today, but I mean it don't cover the area, and that's why we've got some of this delinquents, some of the problem we got. That's why I personally have started to take over at limited time and money to create a situation down here in an undeveloped area to take care of some of these young people. They're the people of tomorrow, and all of us have become so involved in our everyday life that we're slipping.
Do you feel that that would have been really Mr. Honeywell's philosophy, what you're doing down there?
If what I'm doing right today, if Mr. Honeywell was here, I wouldn't have to worry about development. Believe me, I wouldn't even have to ask for anything. All I'd have to do is mention Mr. Honeywell, and that whole area would be developed.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever equipment was necessary would be in there, and we'd have a live wire group working. Well, I can't be mayor and try to be halfway supervisor of a small business and do all these things. And I feel it's a definite area different from the park setup that we have today. I think it's a little bit outside of the line unless somebody is going to be a person like Cecil Mills that can devote the time to it. I don't think it comes under community service.
Yeah.
I think it's a separate thing. I think the mayor definitely is the person that should spearhead that. And I hope with a little start we got that we can really get it off the ground next year.
Good. Do you think that there was ever a time that Honeywell would move out of the community, Jim?
No, there were several occasions where I think Mark was sorely tempted, but he's like I am. I get a little discouraged once in a while, and I think, well, why don't I just go somewhere and start all over? But I think Mark was a dedicated person to the community. This was his whole love and thought, and while Mark got way up the ladder, he was still a little country town boy that grew up here, and Wabash was his, and he wanted to do something with it. And I have in a minor way the same feeling. I go away from here, I've traveled everywhere, all over the period of the last 20 years, 30 years. And after going to the West Coast or to the East, you're up in Canada, and I come back. The most beautiful sight I see on my way is when I hit the city limits of Wabash, believe me.
Yeah, I'll bet it is. Do you think that the labor relations over the years have been pretty good there, Jim?
I think they've been excellent. We've had a couple little flare-ups, but we have very, very minor labor problems in comparison with other communities. One reason is, with the exception of General Tire, it's diversified. We have a number of small operations, but nothing that's so big that it's attractive to the labor unions to come in and really put pressure on us. And I think it's been wonderful over the period of years.
And Honeywell.
An example of that was the Honeywell business. Now, I worked there for 16 years. We had no labor problems at all. We didn't have a labor union. There was recently a vote with the Ford meter box, which is probably one of our biggest year-round plants today, about a union. And that thing didn't get off the ground because the relationship with the people of the community, this is not owned by outside interests. It worked out of a board of directors. There are local people involved. With the exception of General Tire, all the other factories there are locally owned and operated. And over 32 years, we're going on 32 years, our Foundry, we've never had any labor problem. My only problem is I can't get the fellas, as they get age on them, or I don't like too well, I can't get them to quit. I don't fire people, and they like it well enough that even if they drift away for maybe a year, they're always coming back. We don't have any labor turnover out there.
Good.
The same thing is true with Ford meter box. The relation between the Ford meter box management and the employees is just out of this world. They don't even want a union. They're happy. And I
Honeywell's-
think the other plants
Yeah.
deal machine works. There was never any problem down there until they finally did get a little organization going. Well, they've had some problems, but it's never been serious.
You would say that Honeywell would fall into this category and the harmonious...
I think today, if Mark Honeywell was alive, even under the corporate setup they've got with Minneapolis and their other branches, I think Mark Honeywell would be the same as I am here in this office. He'd be down there every morning before the help got in. He'd wander around over the place to see what's going on. He'd be a part of the action, and I don't think they'd have any confusion or problem with the help.
Anything else you'd like to add, Jim, on Honeywell or the community or Mr. Honeywell or the Honeywell plant, the foundation? I think we've pretty well touched all the bases.
Well, other than he's one of the founders of the community, it should go down in history that way. Naturally, we're getting along without him, but his handwork is evidence here every day you move around over the community of what he did. He made a mark. He left something behind him. None of us can stay here forever. And I think that's the whole psychology of life. It's not how much you may accumulate. It's the things that you do in your daily life that leaves a little mark after you're gone, because it's very, very shortly after you're gone. Most people tend to forget, but every day we're reminded both of the Honeywell Gardens, the Country Club, the Honeywell Foundation, the Honeywell plant. That was one of the stipulations in Mark's agreement when he went together with the Minneapolis company and formed this corporation, when they went together on the thing, that there should be, the plant would be maintained in Wabash. It wouldn't be moved to Minneapolis. And while it's had its ups and downs, we still have a Honeywell plant in Wabash.
You ever thought about naming a street after Mark Honeywell, Jim, now as your mayor?
Yes, I have. But certain people, through selfish reasons, and if they're not named, they hate to see anybody else named. We got into that with Bob Mitten. Bob Mitten was with all of his faults that some people can come up with, was a dedicated Wabash citizen. And if you go back through the records and see all the things that Bob Mitten was involved in, where Wabash was first, Homer Shawalter was another one, and we have people that we're not unanimous in our thoughts. And if I'd come up here tomorrow and through Homer Shawalter's efforts that he's done with Kiwanis and the youth and the church activity and being mayor and all that, and I'd want to name a street here, a new street, the Shawalter Street, I'd have a dozen people that would be scoring to high heaven. They did finally name a place, Mitten Drive or something, and there was a lot of confusion about that. And there was a group come up and wanted to name the park out here after Bob Mitten because of his activities. Well, that thing had bogged down. So I don't know. I suppose that I think it'll come up again, and I have got that on the list. I've got two things on my mind that I'd like to, during my administration, have something to be a living monument toward Bob Mitten, and I still have another one in mind of Mark Honeywell and Homer Shawalter. And this is not political, because
You're splitting
Mark
right down the middle.
Honeywell,
Yeah.
Mark Honeywell was a Republican, and he belonged to the Committee of 100, and we didn't agree politically, but I still respect him as a man. Homer Shawalter's a Republican. He's one of my best friends. And I do think there's two dedicated people that after they're gone, of course Mark's gone, but after Homer's gone, I feel there should be some kind of a thing here. In fact, I renovated an old plaque that I made
noticed
years
that, yeah,
ago
yeah.
for something, which I'm going to clean up and have it put in either the museum or someplace here for Homer Shawalter on his activities on community service.
That should be in the Honeywell
And
Center.
this was taken out of an old office building that I made that years ago for Mark, or for Homer.
Right.
And it was awarded to him by community service. Cecil Mills was still on the job. And it got misplaced or something, and somebody found it and brought it up here. And Homer probably has forgotten all about it. And I want to clean it up and get it in some kind of shape. And if I can't find any place else to put it, I'm going to put it up in my office for the next 3 years, believe me.
Good for you. Well, I think this is most interesting, and Particularly that this interview is the day after the elections, Jim.
My day after the election, yesterday was election.
Yes,
This is a new ball game.
Right, and I
And
appreciate.
the world is going on this the same, so...
Hey, did you ever know Mr. Honeywell to be active politically, and now that you're...
Oh, yes, definitely. He was a very bitter opponent of Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And Mr. Honeywell, at one time, was a supporter of Alf Landon.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Alf Landon came through Wabash on a whistle stop. He would come out and make a platform appearance, a train that went through up on the Wabash, so we all were notified in advance, and they had the group, a bunch of them, passed out sunflower badges, Alf Landon. Everybody was supposed to put them on. The notice was put on the bulletin board that we would march in a group at a certain time up to the Wabash Depot to welcome Alfred Landon, and then we'd come back down to the plant in a group, and we got paid for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I, at that time, happened to be on the other side of the fence. I and my older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't go. We didn't put on the badge, and we didn't go. So we went right ahead and worked through. We were the only two in the whole group of about, at that time, about 250 to 300 employees. And the janitor, poor John Reich, stayed on the job, the caretaker, during the day.
Was he a Democrat, or?
He was a Democrat, by the way, but he had to stay there to keep the doors open.
Right.
And Johnny came up, and he was just shocked and amazed that Brother Forrest and I were still working. We worked just the same as if the plant was going full blast. We were up in the pattern shop.
Uh-huh.
Well, he said, boys, that does it. You'll be out of a job when they get back. Well, that was our conviction. We didn't like to be pushed. So we went ahead and worked. There was nothing said. The group come back and looked at us kind of shy-like. They thought, well, they won't be here long. Nothing was said for 2 or 3 days, and finally, Mark Honeywell come out through there, this as friendly as could be, and spoke to my brother and I, and come over. He said, well, I understand you didn't go up to see Alf Landon. Nope. Well, he said, I admire you for your attitude. He said, half of them that went didn't feel that way, but they went because they was intimidated.
Right.
And he said, I admire your courage and sticking on the job and going ahead with it. No hard feelings, and that was it. And that's been my feeling toward the opposition party all the time, because while he gave a lot of money toward the Republican campaign on a national basis, he still had a sense of humor and a sense of fairness that it rubbed off on me, and I have felt very strongly that way ever since. And today there's no bitterness toward the way the election came out. I'm disappointed certainly on a governorship thing, because Matt Welch and I, this is getting political.
Go ahead.
Matt Welch and I are personal friends, and I had so many things where I would have a pipeline into the state that I could have done for Wabash in the next 3 years that I had been very active. Nationally, I'm cold. I'm very much disappointed, but that's the way the ball bounces, and I'll do the best I can.
Good. Jim, this has been a most interesting session, and thank you
Well,
very much for taking your time from a busy
I'm not
day.
a public speaker, so believe me, it's very crude, but it's from here, and
That's what
I
counts.
guess the people can read between the lines, so
I hope so. And thanks again, Jim.
you bet.